Good morning, dear participants. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to this CFO meet. And before we begin our proceedings, I'll request our Vice Chairman, CA Dr. Raj Chawlaji, to kindly welcome the participants. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Rangnathanji. Good morning to all. First of all, I welcome on this interactive session webinar on CFO Meet. And first of all, I am thankful CA Nitin D. Parekh, CFO Zydus Lifecare Limited, and CA VS Parthasarthi, coach, mentor, and entrepreneur, ex GCFO and President Mahindra Group, member of GEB Mahindra and Mahindra Limited. I also welcome CA Joy Basuji, ED and CFO Times Internet Limited. I also welcome CA Sarju P. Simaria, ex-CFO, Senior Executive Vice President, Edelweiss Financial Services Limited. And special thanks to my moderator, CA Ruchi Maheshwari, Founder, CEO, RPMG Risk Consulting, ex-AM, EX-RBS. And very, very special thanks to my chairman of Committee for Member in Industry and Business, CA Ranjit Kumar Agarwalji from Calcutta, who is really a dynamic leader in our profession and institute. And under his guidance, I am learning the things. So with this, thank you, Rangaji. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, sir. And it is my pleasure to welcome our dear chairman, CA Ranjit Kumar Agrawalji from Calcutta, who is a member of the Governing Council and chairman of this committee, to kindly say a few words. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Rangnathanji. A very good morning to all of you. I welcome all the participants here for this first program by Committee for Member in Industry and Business. And considering all the changing taking place across the globe, we have decided to come out with a unique program, Job 2.0, rebooting to Meta era. And for this, we have invited industry experts, those members who are our members, also. And this galaxy of speaker will deliberate on this future of this job creation or job availability globally, and to extract the good thing or bad thing from these experts. We have Ruchi Maheshwari also to moderate this session. Friends, when this Facebook changed its name to Meta, this metaverse become the buzzword globally. And when we type in the Google the meta world, the Google will give you 190 million options, search option. And this metaverse is a futuristic virtual space that combines aspects of digital and physical worlds. And many companies are creating their own version of this metaverse due to their new word is coming, FOMO, fear of missing out. This is also coming. And the Bill Gates, if I remember, the Bill Gates has said that within the next 2 to 3 years, I predict most virtual meeting will move from 2D camera image to 3D, and 3D with the digital avatars. So this is the quotation given by this Bill Gates. And if you see the Flipkart, they have launched Flipkart Labs to test Web3 and metaverse use cases. This is the new things Flipkart started. There is a company called Kia.ai. It's a digital solution provided for the financial institution like banks and other, where it will build a 3D virtual platform for banks to create a lifelike experience for their customer. It's a unique thing. I have never heard or never seen it. There is another company called Niftycally. I have read that Niftycally is a company which is providing this white label solution for NFT. And they will also in the process to selling the virtual land, which the pricing will be from $200 to $180,000, and they will charge 5% fees as a service charge. MG India in Calcutta, in MG India has launched MG Verse, where users can interact with the visual virtual database, the customer, partner, and this employee and staff. They can work together in that space. They can socialize also. And those companies who are in this business like Teamflow, Gather, Verbella, they are in the process to create this virtual space, and their business is going to grow exponentially. Bloomberg says the metaverse could approach $800 billion market size in the days to come. How this development is going to change the work culture, as pandemic has already set the ball rolling. India being the youngest workforce, and they are very adaptable for the digital culture. They have already forced a large MNC to change their work culture from physical to hybrid. And moreover, what I see in our Institute of Chartered Accountants India, we are doing this campus placement. Now all the company, they are focused on more on the tier 2 and tier 3 cities. They are hiring the talent from there. They are allowing them to work from their space, not required to move or migrate to the metro city. And this new concept, because in our campus placement, the hiring from the non-metro is more than the metro. This is the new trend we can see. But there are challenges of this digital world, virtual space also. These edutech companies are also closing down. They are laying off their staffs and all this. Baiju and Unacademy, they have already moved to the virtual to hybrid. And there are so many online startup like Uday and Vedantu already laid off their employee. So my query will be that we have already read in our childhood that a man is a social animal. You cannot keep them for long in the four corners of this wall. So how long this virtual space is going to impact the health and the growth and immunity? This is a challenge also. But the world is changing, and we have the expert like Parthasarthi, Joy Basu, Nitin Parekh, Sarjuji, and to moderate the Ruchi Maheshwari, I hopeful that all the participants will definitely be benefited by the deliberation of this very, very unique and important session organized by a Committee for Member Industry and Business of ISA. So I welcome all of you for this very lively session, and I hand over this proceeding to Ruchi Maheshwari, our own member, and who will moderate this show. So thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, sir, for a very wonderful words of wisdom, which has set the platform for today's discussions. Thank you so very much. Now, before I hand over the virtual dais to our able moderator, CA Ruchi Maheshwari ji, just a few lines about her introduction. CA Ruchi Maheshwari is an assurance and risk consultant, entrepreneur, and a mentor and guide for management personnel. She is a member qualified 25 years ago in 1997 and has decades of extensive corporate experience in the domain of banking and financial sector. She started her career through campus placement at Unit Trust of India and subsequently moved to MNC organizations like the American Express, Royal Bank of Scotland. Her career journey helped her rise to senior leadership roles and gain expertise in the fields of internal controls, Sarbanes-Oxley, compliance, risk management, and project management. Her last role as RBS as Vice President, Risk and Compliance. Ruchi quit her said role in 2019 to get into her own consulting firm and venturing into entrepreneurial world. She assists organizations to build a strong enterprise-wide risk framework with focus on building a risk awareness culture, robust documentations, and implementing strategic controls for improved business efficiency. Above all, she's a very enthusiastic participant in ICA's all activities, and ICA is blessed to have a member like CA Ruchi Maheshwari. Ma'am, over to you. Thank you so very much.
Thanks a ton, Mr. Ranga, and I'm really honored to have such a great, extensive, introduction for myself. But I think I am not the limelight for the show, as Mr. Ranjit and others said. Today, the esteemed panel that we have, the stalwart of the panels that we have today, is the limelight because they are the ones with so much of an experience. And I'm not going to kind of repeat on them, but definitely we have more than a century's experience on this panel, and that whole experience with varied field and the industries that they come from is an area which we will all put in light in today's discussion. Just to kind of take a step back before I really get into the conversation, and actually I want the audience to get into the conversation more rather than just being on the introductions. I'm just trying and pushing fast. But yes, I would like to take a step back and talk about Meta a bit before we kind of move forward. And Mr. Ranjit did share about the whole of the metaverse and how everybody's concentration came on when really Facebook changed its name to Meta. But what really is meta? Let's do like a deep dive and understand. So meta, if I take a dictionary meaning, it is a word that means beyond what's reality, or real, moving on to what something that is in the future is what really meta means. And we all are talking about digitalization, globalization, and various other aspects, but these aspects are a part of change, and I think all of us definitely believe that change is the new constant. Right, we've lived in reality for long. I think now it's time to get into virtual reality and augmented reality, and the way that we go forward is what meta is. So and I really remember the old days when we used to see the futuristic Hollywood movies, or we would see the programs like Star Wars, where people would transition into the future and see something new, and we would say, how can that happen? But I think the virtual reality space is going to be that, where we have our own caricatures depicted in a virtual world, in the 4D world, in the 7D world is what we can talk about. And that's what is going to change. But today is the time where we start looking into what the future holds for us. And it's a good platform where we can connect with all these senior panelists and understand from them what they perceive, because definitely they understand the industries better, the globe, the platforms better, and they can at least be the torch bearers for us to put the lights. Yes, definitely nobody can predict the future, but at least we can find our way on to the future. So I'm just going to take just a round back again with all my panelists and ask them what do they feel about meta. And definitely, I'm not kind of stopping myself to kind of go into the detailed introduction, but as Mr. Raj Chavda already introduced, these are CFOs with great experience. They have great, they have achievements, which I can, even 2 hours is less for me to kind of talk of each one's achievement, the awards, and various things that each of them hold. But definitely their experience is something that we're going to understand while we talk and get into the conversation. So I think I'm going to first jump in with Mr. Basu. And, as we were talking, because he brings joy to the whole group. So Mr. Joy is going to be the first panelist whom I'm going to quiz and ask him, Joy sir, what do you think is meta and what does it hold for us?
Good. Thank you, Ruchi. And it's a great pleasure to be here. And you mentioned, Ruchi, about experience, a wealth of experience this panel has. And I'm going to make one prediction. Much of this experience will soon be history. Henry Ford had said history is bunk. And we did not believe him. But the rate and pace at which the world is changing, that may well be true. I passed out my CA some 37 years ago, I think, before most of this audience was born. And a lot of the things that I learned at that time is irrelevant today. Stuff like estate duty, MRTP, FERA. And one small prediction, without being a pundit, without having a crystal ball, is that is more true for this generation. The students who are passing out today, entering the profession, etc. I can predict that in another 20 years, they will have to have a whole new set of skill sets. That is reality. That is inevitable. The world is changing. And as Ranjit ji rightly said, we all heard this name Meta after Facebook changed its name. Yeah. That's when we figured out there is something seems to be going on here. Something major seems to be happening. What exactly is going on? Now, what exactly is Meta? No one really knows. No one really knows how it will evolve. And this is not me, Joy Basu, speaking. This is Mark Zuckerberg speaking. Mark Zuckerberg says that this technology will evolve. And we are perhaps at a stage when we were about 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago, when India Inc. was wondering, what is this internet all about? We are probably at that stage. We do not know exactly how things will pan out, but we know the future is exciting. You have the benefit of technology and powerful, stuff like, AR and VR, which allow a 3D experience across on such a scale which is unimaginable today. And that will change the way our businesses work. In some cases, the change will be greater. In some cases, the change will be less. We need to try our best to anticipate these changes and even take advantage of these changes. Otherwise, many of our businesses will be wiped out. So there are risks and there are opportunities. And we have to seize those opportunities in our businesses as well as in our profession to be on top of things and get ahead of the curve. I mean, that is reality. As Ranjit ji rightly said about Bill Gates and his quotation, maybe 3 years from now, if we have this meeting, it would have been on a very different platform, a meta platform. We could have all been sitting around a table. We could have been looking at the audience, staring at their eyeballs. Right now, today, how many people are watching this conference? I don't know. Is it 50? Is it 500? Is it 200? We have no idea. A much more interactive experience would have been there. So this is here to stay, and the pace of change will be much faster than what we have seen in the past. It took India Inc. about 20 years to adapt to the internet as it stands today. It took maybe 10 years for all of us to understand and embrace the cloud. I don't think we will have that luxury going forward. We have to change much, much faster and take advantage of these opportunities. And on top of that, if we layer the government's vision, which is that I think the figure is they expect 650 million Indians to be connected to the net by next year. Now, even if we discount that figure by 10 or 20%, that's still a huge figure. I mean, to put it in perspective, it is twice the number of people who use toothbrushes in this country. And this changes our addressable market. It expands our addressable market. It expands the way in which we reach out to them. It also increases risks. The meaning of cybersecurity, among other things, will undergo a sea change. And we have to get ahead of the curve. We have to learn these technologies. I'm not saying that all CAs will need to be technology experts, but they will need to be, their responsibilities will grow, their span of responsibilities will grow. They will need to be like, what shall I say, like the conductor of an orchestra, right? And be able to stitch together teams and take on much wider responsibilities. The way in which we do work will change, undergo a sea change. This work from home is here to stay. I mean, I'm a firm believer in that. It's still happening, even although the pandemic seems to be going away, fingers crossed. But the way in which we do things, there is a company I was reading, I mean, Ruchi sent some stuff and I was reading, there's a company, it's called MGM Resorts. They have now they're recruiting people, particularly their frontline staff. And before recruiting them, they're giving them a virtual reality of what their work is going to be like. So you can actually spend 3-4 days doing the work as a cashier or as a front room person or as a customer service person. And then only if you like it and if the organization likes you, you actually get into the job. Now just imagine this would have such a huge impact. Otherwise, you have training people, you've got people who sort of leave somewhere down the line, attrition levels, etc., will come down. You as an employee, whoever the employee is, will also be in a much better position to decide whether I should go here. It should not be a blind faith in the dark. So these are the very powerful changes. We can only give signals based on what the pundits say, based on our own experiences. But life will be challenging and unpredictable, and we have to change it.
Thanks, Mr. Joy. And I'm going to move towards Mr. Parekh. And Mr. Parekh, what is your view on Meta and what the changes do you think are going to come in? Mr. Parekh.
You're on mute. Yeah.
So thank you for this opportunity, first of all, and organizing this program, inviting us to join in a very interesting session. I have equal number of post CA qualification like Mr. Joy mentioned. 37 years. I passed out in 1985, and 1997 I was in US. And in the science world, looking at what the fantasy world can be. And in a closed room, you go for a different kind of experience there, as if you are moving, as if things are working all of a sudden, around you, war is going on and missiles are coming, etc. I think metaverse now brings all those virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed technologies to give that an immersing experience online, where now people are not just only commenting or posting or scrolling, but as if they're interacting in the reality world. And many of these technologies, which sometime even before 2 years possibly were thought as only names, fashion, etc. I think I've already seen much faster adoption in the industry. Talk of artificial intelligence, talk of advanced tools. They are all working in industry. People like us and many other companies are using various technology for better forecast accuracy, predictive analysis part, for plant maintenance part, machine learning and other things. Robotics are working, bots are working in IT, HR, and various other things to answer most employee-related matters and questions. And automation of processes like procure to pay, order to cash, etc. All of them are happening. Companies like us in pharma and other segments are also using visualization, to reduce the development times. I think many interesting things happening around e-commerce has taken us by storm. I think the way many of us now, do our, payments. If you visualize before 5 years the way we were behaving and the way we are now, conducting our business, hardly a need to go to bank, I think, and many of us actually say, okay, that's okay, that's the way it happened. But just think about the years before, we are running to bank with a passbook to be filled in. I think significant change has been done in that, and many changes are happening. And I agree to, Basu's viewpoint that things are acting and are likely to act much faster than the speed that we are able to visualize. I think that's the uncertainty element. The speed element is also going to take us by surprise. Some negative sides of this technology revolution, transformation, also in terms of the gap between physical and virtual world is coming down. The gap between robotics and humans are coming down. Not necessarily good thing, but at the same time, with plethora of social information, and the portals and at many other activities. We being subscribers to many of the applications, data and the personal data, is certainly coming in, question in terms of the privacy part of that. And also CFOs like us, as Joy mentioned, with 30 years plus experience, used to, work in a predictable world. We like to forecast, cash flows, budgets, 5 years plan, etc. I think all the cycles are coming under question. To what extent you can really predict these things, because the things are changing at much faster speed. But at the end of this, I'm still, very confident about one thing, that tons of, analyzed data, reports, predictive analysis, prescriptive analysis, all these things put together, the power of human mind, the judgment side of that would always remain. So artificial intelligence, in my view, at least in a foreseeable future, would not replace human intelligence. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Parekh. And I'm going to move on to Mr. Sergio Samaya. What is your view on this?
Mirroring my views as my colleagues mentioned, I think first and foremost, I think is recognizing the fact that the world is changing. Because the moment you recognize, then you react and you do activities, and the world is actually changing, and you have to recognize with the intention of benefiting out of that, not with a regret. I have seen, people who survive longer is not the species who are strongest or intelligent, the species who respond to the change. And I would assume meta by nature is and change. What has worked in the past will not work in the future. Change is the only constant. But somewhere the fact is that didn't meta happen much earlier, friends? If you really ask, do you remember the days where MTML phone was an advanced booking we had to do for an MTML phone? Now we are in mobile. The mobile has synced in so much that we don't say that there was a meta change there, because obviously it got virtual, but it was happening around. In subconscious, conscious mind, we didn't realize the moment that meta word came to play. We are now realizing that the speed is going to be extremely fast, and we'll have to cope up with the new meta era. I would assume that the boundary lines are fake now. I mean, whether it's a people, whether it is countries, whether it is users, I think we are connected directly. The intermediary is getting eliminated. I would assume that the speed and the accuracy and the transparency, the connectivity across board, that what you do is now in a public domain, more or less. You have to conduct yourself in a phase, in a meta area. What we were doing earlier, obviously the style approach will get amended. I would also at the same time say that while all of that I said is something that you will have to be mindful of, but there are certain cardinal principles that we operate with, and particularly profession like CA, either as a practice or as a job position. There are some cultural values which have to be kept intact, and those I mean like they're non-compromisable. Whether you call it integrity, whether you call it custodianship, whether you call it at in the interest of all stakeholders, what will be the speed of change, which we are anyhow moving at a great bullet train speed. These fundamental values will have to be kept intact, will be kept intact, I'm sure. And that mindfulness, I thought I will enforce as a little bit new novel position that I think should be kept in mind and should be spoken about time and again. That change of speed through meta does not take away the approach of culture and principles. I think that is very important. And then obviously we'll have B2B and B2C, as I said, intermediaries will go. And you will also obviously face the fact that in a meta era, how do you encash the opportunities? Because if you as somebody mentioned, the fear of missing out. Now, fear of missing out was you obviously mean the fact that you are into a junction where you want to do things rightly, but the quickness, if you do it rightly, you are compromising. If you want to do things quick, how will you do it rightly? So I think it's going to be a real juggle as we go along with the speed to balance the rightness and the quickness as we adopt to meta era. And this will be very true for CA profession, either in practice or as a position, as a job or as a CFO. You will have to really put the fulcrum to see that all the stakeholders' interests are protected. And therefore, meta era is inevitable. Of course, there is no end game. I agree to my peer panelists that it's evolving. We don't know how and what shape, but certainly you will have to gear up and recognize that there is an era. Subconsciously, it was there earlier, but now it is on the forefront, and play the game in such a way that you continue to hold your culture and principles intact.
Thanks. I think, Sajid, you've really brought in a very good point, which I'm going to pick up during the discussion. But just moving across the table, and we have Partha and, the immense knowledge and things that he brings in. I think he's going to be sharing definitely his view, and we are all looking forward to it. So Partha sir, what's your view on the overall meta thing and the change that this brings in to us? So you're on mute, so.
I have not started. Yes. But good to hear that I have become a warrior from being Krishna. But I like it. Okay, so no problems with that. I keep asking myself one question, and I want to kind of go back in time. 1900 street of New York, horse carriages all across, and not a single vehicle as we know it today. 1913, 13 years later, same New York, same photograph, not a single horse carriage and all a vehicle. Life changed. Yeah, the change was so fast that, now you could not have any more horse shit. Yeah. Okay, you could have bullshit, but you could not have horse shit anymore. Yeah. So what is changed? फिर भी वो शाम को आके वही वो क्या कहते हैं फिर वही शाम वही गम वही तन्हाई है. So what's changed to them? Life may have, some aspects have changed, but there is change as yet no change. Yeah, life is still going forward. So this technology, what has changed? So that's in a sense a kind of thought that goes to me that take another example. We all got, and COVID. It's always like the death for marriages. We will keep you separate. Always. You can only see me in virtual form. And then we all got together in virtual form. Today is also a virtual world. Has life changed? Yeah. Is it become a little bit better in the sense, it's like what the Zoroastrians said to India, that when we come in, we'll be like sugar in the milk. We'll make it sweet. So is this making it sweet? It's not changing anything fundamentally. Is it making it sweet? And therefore, is that sweet? Meta se meeta tak is the journey that we have to do. Okay. So that's the kind of thought which goes into my mind. And I therefore thought, let's not forget that these are tools which add immense amount of joy, if I can use, because of Joy Basu in this, and have ruchi in everything that we do. Okay. So using two names out of the panel and moderator. Okay. So if that is what it is helping us, let's make best use of it. But there is nothing to be worried about. Okay. So that's one end. Okay. So second is, yes, it is going to change behaviors. We don't need physical currencies when we can have digital currencies. It's like that everything will change, right? So earlier we used to fly down. So is it the death of distance? Yes. So, we don't have to go. We can talk today. Today, we don't have to physically meet in a hall, right? But just remember this, as soon as the COVID restriction lifted, everyone wanted to meet personally. They had said, and it looked as if the street of Mumbai looked as if no change has ever happened in life. It's as congested as this one the moment you lift it. So there is this new and old which will mix. And I want to contest with Joy and Nitin and Raju that 35-30 years, मतलब कुछ भी बचा नहीं, ऐसा नहीं, बहुत कुछ चेंज हुआ है और बहुत कुछ कॉमन भी है. जितना चेंज हुआ उतना ही कॉमन है. So the more it changes, the more it appears the same. So I think I want to keep that spirit alive. Otherwise, we'll not have any place in the new world. But
we are still not useless people. I'm very sure about that.
You're the best people, and that's why you're here to kind of guide all of us.
Thank you. I told her that I will, infuse some debate into the meeting to Ruchi when she called me, and that's what I'm trying to do. So death of distance is this. Second is it death of excuses? So he said, boss, वो मिल ही नहीं रहा. तो बोले, अच्छा चलो मैं एक बटन दबाता हूँ, दिख जाएगा. Virtual reality. Yeah. So I'll have this one. Is it death of physical collaboration going forward? Yeah, I wanted to kind of put it, and maybe we can debate it. I used to say, when anybody asks you what is life, I said thrilling, pulling, or feeling ke siwa life mein hai kya? So now what happens to all this in the meta world? So is it changed? Is it fundamentally changed, or it's still not changed? If it's not changed, the more it changes, the more it remains the same. Okay. What about death of physical training? Is it any more required, any physical training, or yeah? So, but one fundamental thing, which it seems to be, that earlier we have to take ourselves to the world. That was a physical world. Now the world can come to us. That's the virtual world. We can bring this. So the method has changed, but it's still, I have to collaborate with them. They have to collaborate. So TP has become VP, which is telepresence have become virtual presence. Yeah. So that's the change. The third point I wanted to leave with it is that we will come to job. That's the topic. Okay. But I want to keep that rolling to say, inventory में पहले हमारा होता था runner, repeater, stranger. Runner वो जो रोज जरूरत है, repeater वो जो it comes every 2 days a week, every 3 days a week I require. And then stranger is kabhi kabhi jab zarurat hogi, once in a while. So all jobs will become runner, repeaters, and changers. So runners, you have to come daily to office till the virtual world will only enable you, physically help you. Yeah. But you have to be physically there, like loader. If still things have to be loaded in a ship, it has to be loaded. Then there is repeater who kind of says, once in a while, every 3 days, every day, every week, I want to meet to plan together so that I can touch, feel, and then we can go back to our virtual worlds and metaverse and whatever, AI and BI and CI, whatever, right? The new term called ABCD could be American boss confused C9, but the alphabets of this, right? Artificial intelligence. Yeah. B could be Bitcoins to big data. Yeah.
Blockchain.
Yeah, blockchain.
Thank you,
Secret business
Frozen.
entity. So you all love that, right? Everyone, we all could term our own. So ABCD to ABCD. No more confused, but yeah, collaborating this. Yeah. Okay. So those are the kind of changes that happen. So I just wanted to leave this runner, repeater, stranger. So is a jobs changing and what more? Okay. So we'll come back and discuss this in detail. But I thought that as an opening comment, this could be at least padakta, if not nothing else. Okay.
And I think आपने Bollywood, Hollywood सब याद दिला दिया सबको. So I'm sure everybody remembers that part. Yeah, and I think good points from the panelists, and I think it is really nice to know that we've changed. As Partha mentioned about New York around 1900s versus Sarju mentioned about the mobile coming in and various other changes. And I think if I have to talk about the recent past, the changes that's really coming in the finance world, we're talking about the digital finance, or digital tools or distributed ledgers, blockchains, bots, chats, robotics into our finance processes and various such aspects that we keep talking, and a lot of this is actual reality. When I say reality, we've actually adopted such changes into our organizations already. So before we really talk into Meta, I just wanted to kind of understand from Mr. Parekh, because he talked about chatbots and various other things, that if Mr. Parekh, we are seeing the digital technology entering into the finance function, and that disruption's already started. And as we mentioned, since Meta is going to bring that disruption further, how do you see that this disruption is going to take forward, kind of move forward? We've already are into the chain of disruption, but what's your view on the future disruptions and the current digital technologies that are being used in finance?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ruchi, for that. I think very interesting question. And like in many other companies, in Zydus also, finance and IT are together. Means CFO, I handle finance, IT, and legal functions. I know V.S. Parthasarathy handling both CIO, CFO positions and Mahindra. And I think it's a very good combination because in a lighter manner, I many times say that IT, when makes a proposal for any such transformational initiative, finance normally asks what is the ROI of that. And if you wear both the hats, it becomes little easier because you need to convince yourself. And that becomes little easier to take a leap of faith approach many times rather than in a really calculated ROI approach. Having said so, I think there are three different stages through which these digital initiatives go through. The first stage, which many organizations have experienced, is an operational efficiency phase. How IT digital initiatives bring some kind of operational efficiency, cost reduction, wastage reductions, early signals, etc., dashboard, and many other information segments. The second was in terms of more of a business partnership and revisiting the business models as to how your business remains robust. Is it still making sense, or technology is changing the way you do business, the way your manufacturing blueprint is there, the way your supply chain works, etc. So that was the second phase. And third is what is now the business transformation part, going in a holistic manner for the organization. And depending on where and which stage the corporates function in terms of the strategy, the organization, people, technology, data, I think all of these things change. Having said so, in my experience, on a relative basis, service sector has done much better compared to the manufacturing sector in terms of technology adoption. In general, I'm saying, if you look at fintech, banking, insurance, many such industries have much faster adoption, and both the speed as well as the depth of adoption is much higher in service sector compared to the manufacturing sector. And obviously within the manufacturing sector, again, it's a function of industry like automobile, FMCG has done much more better than compared to, let's say, pharma companies. So that's the variations in terms of the adoption. But so many things in terms of finance function are there which are now based on digital technology. Talk of, let's say, robotic processes or automation processes which have entered in most accounting processes like procure to pay, record, order to cash, etc. Bank reconciliation is now based on bot. We have annual, financial statements and closing happening with a lot of, data, information, algorithms, data processing done. Financial planning is based on that. We have so many different, modules and attachment to SAP system, to work in a much more automated manner with a lot of information at your disposal, rather than, taking decisions based on unchanged judgments and past trends. And there are several, benefits of that. For example, now most of the applications which are also mapped on mobile, you are away from your office and still you are able to do transactions, approvals, authorization, leave application onwards, submission of your travel vouchers onwards. So many things can be done. We have, let's say, capex approval and credit check approval, etc. All of them mapped on mobile. So distance, physical existence, all of these things are not, becoming important. And there is a lot of accuracy now also coming along with this. Speed is much faster. Collaboration is much faster. Earlier, many of the data segments were considered to be in the domain of finance. So, the business needs information, will say, okay, finance needs to provide X, Y, Z data, this costing data, this margin data, this gross margin data, etc., for business to take decisions. Now, all of that information is available, right? The business people themselves get this information. So it also brings a single, version of the truth. There's a lot of transparency in the way the decisions are taken. A lot of collaboration gets, formed because of that. What is also happening because of that is, scenario analysis, as if analysis, all of these things are now, business people are able to do on their own. So that, brings the power of, technology in terms of decision making. So I think very, very interesting, things happening in this field. And I'm pretty sure that the extent to which this adoption will be there in times to come would be obviously much more in terms of depth and much more in terms of the canvas.
Yeah, no, perfectly right, Mr. Parekh. And I think that's what we all need to kind of start building up to kind of be relevant in the job space, because that's the topic, and I'm sure we're going to touch upon it as we go forward. But this is just the grounding that we're doing for the audience so that they understand that how the future is going to change and how that's going to help. So I think while I was hearing you, it just reminded me back of what Mr. Sarju said actually in the initial comments, and he said about the behavioral changes that we will need to kind of be prepared for, and I'm just trying and linking those things together. So, Sarju sir, if you could just mention to us, what are the things that behaviorally as finance professionals we need to be ready for to kind of take on this whole era, because definitely that behavioral aspects need to be built in to be prepared, not only if we are in the industry, but even if we are into practice or whatever, we need to kind of build that behavioral aspects. So because you mentioned those in your starting comments, I'm going to just move on to you to pick up from there.
Well, sure. I think, Mr. Parthasarathi, I already started becoming your admirer. And it's always to have a wisdom discussion. One is to have a contrarian opposition, so that there is a wisdom which doesn't take, otherwise it becomes biased. So thank you for your views. The point probably I mentioned in my starting remarks was that world is changing. It's important that the intention is to take positive out of that. And when I say positive out of it, let me put it in an example. And I think my Nitin previous colleague mentioned about technology. I think now is the era where you have things available. You will cut, paste, and copy and do incremental value addition. There's nothing wrong in cut, paste, and copy, where I would assume in an era where everybody was reinventing. Now there is reinvention has become, only on incremental basis. So you add on value to what you need. You decide your peripherals under which you do the incremental value, but you cut, paste, and copy. So that's one of the change I thought I'll bring on the table. And this is also behavioral change, because I recollect that, we would have started with say 1+1 and now we are 1+9 mobile, the 9th version. But do we really know the depth of this mobile, features that are there? We are still using it basic. I think in that sense, now is the speed. If we have that mentality, we'll be laggards. The point I'm trying to drive here is that you will have to know the features of Meta. You will have to know the features in the example of mobile, which is the 9th version, is what it can do. Excel sheets, yeah, you can do the same work in half an hour, but if you know the control functions, you can do it in 5 minutes. So the skills upsetting the first behavior and skill kind of a thing would be to go deep diving. And obviously you will have to learn. You will have to put and burn, make an investment of your time in learning that behavior of, the fact that you should know only 10th or 20% know. I think you'll have to get in. And that's where 100% do incremental value for what you desire for your well-being and for your organization is going to be one. Second, obviously, it's going to be the speed and accuracy and transparency. I think all of this is just, in terms of businesses are ahead, the operations are behind. I think the operations will have to catch up with businesses, or maybe now there is a pause to say let operations be first and let business follow, because there is always a distance gap between the two. And when you have operations with the speed that the environment is changing, lagging behind, you somehow have hiccups at a later stage. So I think there will be either a space of operations and business being together, or certainly operations being ahead, so that you are well in time is going to be another behavioral change. I would assume too much of data, too much of AI. I think you will be, challenged to pick up what is rightly meant for you, and that needs judgment. I think Joy picked up very well. Human being judgment can't be taken away, and therefore, while with host of overwhelming data on your table, you'll have to still apply judgment, and you'll have to still take decision, and those decisions would still be proven wrong or otherwise. The test of decision outcome is still uncertain, by the way, in spite of meta era or the fast evolving meta era. I would also assume behaviorally it's kind of the fact that ease of doing business. They were plethora of physical papers that we used to sign. Now you read on the soft and just give a tick. I agree to all and validate it to the Aadhaar validation, and you are contractually binded. Now, obviously, this is an element of behavior change. People are expecting closures very, very fast. But as custodians, and one of my point was on that, we'll have to still ensure that whatever is being done, where the information is being relied upon, then you need to take care of all the stakeholders. Just because by tendency, that whoever logs into a page and he has converted the entire product into a yes in 5 seconds, I think it's not right. You should force your structure of profile in such a way that the profile gives them enough time to then finally say tick, because there are people who just want to take an advantage of a 5-second tick. So those behaviors will have to be need-based, customer-centric, and that I think is something that people have to be mindful of. I clearly appreciate the point of in this era how the legal contractual will change, because now we'll have to evidence through meta as this was done or this was not done. People start converting commercials on WhatsApp and then they put it into a dotted line. Are they going to put WhatsApp as a dispute that point of time? So we really don't know, and I'm still trying to understand how is the meta reacting and evidencing side of it will emerge. Legal contract, how will that emerge is something that is yet to evolve. I would also believe the confidentiality of data, which is customer data, how secure and safe cybersecurity obviously is the protector, and therefore investment in cybersecurity. I pick up the point from Nitin rightly so that technology and finance will be very, very important synergies. While a lot of MIS will be more automated than anything, it's more of the learning and deciphering the numbers, because numbers speak. They speak of the story in the past, they speak of the story for future. So it'll be more strategy and driven analysis that will go, the seniors bandwidth will go there. And technology, yes, very clearly, if the technology budget is there and if they are not spending money, because if my technology guy would have not spent money last 2 years, we would have probably not known what the COVID, how would you copped up. So technology spending and budget will always go high, and savings in technology spending would be very, very detrimental. So one would rather push between a CFO and a CTO to spend that. Of course, the right elements of spend should be there. So that behavior will change, where technology will take a forefront. Budget, decent budget will have to be given to technology team. I think there will be a projects and milestones, instead of, there will be a macro vision, but everything will get converted into project-backed milestones. And one will have to walk or hawk eye on the achievements will be a behavioral change. Because here again, if the speed is going to be, you're going to be slower, somebody is going to be faster around, So that is another behavioral change. I think it's likely to happen. Gen Z. And one of the point I would want to make is that even today, I mean, let's be honest that our fathers and all of that are struggling to cope up. They for whatever reason, a message bhej dena, yeah, even today, like we are obviously little ahead, and our young generation is ahead of us in that sense. We go back to them, ke bhai ye naya mobile aaya hai, isko download kar sara, ye kaise contact number transfer kare. At our age, we are asking them to do that. So the point that I'm trying to make, the Gen Z will really define how it's going to play out, because it's time, next 2 decades is for them. Experience can't be undervalued. So while entire allied group which is sitting here, the experience can't be undervalued, because you will be telling them in terms of those cultures and all of that, which can't be compromised. So my sense of entire behavioral change would be watch out, adopt, embrace, and then obviously pick up all of this with an element of positivity, with the benefit behind it. Let's not regret things, and let's not be on the sideline.
No, and Mr. Sajay, I think you did bring upon the thing, but I think the one thing that I really liked, and I think which I normally also say, is like, as CAs, we are persons with numbers, and numbers are not going to change. It's just the way that we're going to see those numbers may change, and that's there. But yes, our strength on numbers remains. It's just that we need to kind of bring that behavioral change to accept it rather than on a paper, on a screen. So that's what is moving. And I think now it's more on a virtual platform where somebody, and I think the startup world is already starting to change that, where you have your investors sitting across, 7 seas in the earlier world is what we would talk about in the earlier times, where we would say Saat Samundar Par, traveling to US would be like a Saat Samundar Par journey. But in today's time, it's just a click of a button and having everybody on the same platform from different time zones also together. So yeah, good points. I'm just,
adding one thought to what Sergio said. It's just to say that the concept of unlearning becomes the center stage of the new era. You cannot learn unless you unlearn. So therefore, unlearning is a behavioral trait. First वो कहते हैं रट्टा लगाओ कि बोले नहीं लाइफ टाइम तक. अभी बोलने के लिए सीखो.
Agreed.
And let go of that very quickly. That's the big change.
Yes.
Yeah, and the way I put it is, you have to create space on your in your head. So unlearning is important. That's when you create that space and fill it up with new. So your own hard disks have to be cleared out. If I have to use the technology word to kind of say unlearning. Yeah, and actually, I'm just going to move on to Mr. Basu now, because Mr. Basu brought on the topic of pandemic, and a lot of things in the finance world were forced to be picked up. So as I say that in a lot of organizations, it was unbelievable to kind of do a month end or a quarter end or a year end remotely, especially for finance functions. Jab tak you've not burned the midnight oil, people would say that, finance close kaise hua, or how did you kind of really make your financials? But that's all changed in the last 2 years, right? And definitely this is an indication that things can change, and we have to be ready at a click of a button, because this also happened abruptly, where tomorrow you were said that everything shut down, nobody's going out. So I'm just taking that same precedence to say that now, since we move on to meta era, and you talked about MGM Resorts and various other organizations in the US really giving you like a trial job to say, okay, it's a trial both for both the organization and for the employee to say, you test up the role and we test you as an organization. So how do you look at things in this meta era being, do you think that readiness is there in organizations from an acceptability perspective for people to move on to that? Or, how are they accepting it is what I mean, your thoughts on it.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Meta will change the way we do things. The pace of change will intensify. We need to adapt to change faster. We need to pivot. That's come across very clearly, by this panel. I think we are speaking with one mind, all of us. Yeah. And I would say The pandemic has been a great learning in that direction, where we were forced to change. Ruchi, I call this decade the decade of resets, great resets, which will change to the way we do things forever, which will change the business environment forever, which changes things. And the first of these was the pandemic, the great reset, as I call it. The second reset we are going through now, which is the economic meltdown. I hope we land safely, even if not a smooth landing, a bumpy landing. And then these are negative resets, I would say, negative changes. At least I view them as such. Uh, Change in technology will hopefully be a positive reset. Positive reset, and which will give great opportunity. It will also increase the markets. It will uplift the people. I hope all of that happens, and we're looking forward to that. But the pandemic taught us the need to pivot fast. That was the greatest learning. You're absolutely right, Ruchi. 3 or 4 years ago, somebody told me that one could close the books of an organization and get them audited remotely, sitting at home. I would have never believed you. But we've done it. By and large, India Inc. has responded very positively. The finance function has responded very positively and come out on top and done these things. So that is definitely one learning, the ability to change. And that learning, that change and change at a much faster pace. In this case, of course, it was forced down upon us. And going forward, that will continue. And all our business models are changing, and we've got to learn to pivot. One of the things is, I don't know how long we can continue to have most of our organizations, we have an annual planning cycle. And plus on top of that, maybe a 3-year plan. None of our plans work out, but earlier they would be off by 5%, 7%, 8%. But the internet, but this COVID, as you say, has taught us that it could be off by as much as 50%, positively or negatively. So we've got to focus more towards shorter planning cycles. We've got to plan for scenario building, which we all of us did during the COVID. One of the things, all of us around this table and in the audience as well, we spent a far greater amount of time on forecasting, demand forecasting, cash flow planning, scenario management. What if this COVID goes on for another 1 month? What if it goes on for another 6 months? What do we need to do? How do we need to reinvent ourselves? And that way, it was a great learning. It was a great learning. It was also a great opportunity. We have Nitin from the pharma industry, and I'm sure he's got stories with him. You had a situation where medical representatives, who are the pillars on which any pharma company is built, are not able to interact with doctors. Doctors don't want to meet them, and rightly so. Medical representatives are also stuck at homes. They've got on top of things and they manage things differently. I read somewhere that the first RT-PCR test was conducted by the government in India in 2.5 years ago, exactly 2.5 years ago. Test number 1. Today, they are 1 billion tests. They've taken advantage of technology and scaled. So there are opportunities there to be seized for the brave and the bold and the people who are most adaptable to change, as Darwin said. And that has been demonstrated. It shows that we are resilient enough to make the changes fast. And the other thing, the learning from, important learning, right, from this Partha is, it is now abundantly clear that this hybrid work environment is here to stay. I was reading somewhere that in the US, before the pandemic, 20% of the white collar workforce used to work from out of home. During the pandemic, the number increased from 20% to 70%. But what is important is that survey has shown that 54% of the people want to continue working from home. I don't have Indian statistics, unfortunately. I tried digging them up, but I couldn't find anything. But I would say the numbers would be probably somewhere in the same ballpark. Yeah. We need to get used to a hybrid work culture, working remotely, working in teams, collaboratively. And that's the other thing of the learning. So the pandemic, if you ask me, the positives are it's been a great testing experience to learn how to pivot, to learn how to change, do it fast because it was thrust upon us. Yeah. And that'd be a great learning for the future. Yeah.
Ruchi, allow me to add on. And
Sure.
Joy, I think the two joy that I probably saw when, and that is pandemic related learning, as you touched upon that topic. One is always there was a one, but the collaboration instinct between the different functions has amazingly aligned, and pandemic has led to that collaboration. And two, the idea to give, to share, to ask for help. I mean, the politics have taken a backseat, and I'm just using that word with a lighter note on that. I see, luxury, frankly, artifacts, costing some 5-6 digit in your house or wherever. I don't think so. You kept card for 2 years in COVID. You did all the provisioning buying only. So you are surviving without luxury, aren't we? And therefore, what could that artifact would mean is to say that, look, it's time to say less is also enjoyable. Giving is also enjoyable. Collaboration is also enjoyable. And still work will go as a usual space, which is exactly what the finance team did in 2.5 years. They stood up to the event and still delivered. I think in a lot of the companies, the deadlines for annual finalization has not been pushed back. It is either the same or pushed forward. And this is in spite of Indes and other literatures which have come in, and therefore the ask was quite onerous. But I think people stood up, and therefore hats off to the CA profession on both the side of the corporate and the auditors per se, in the internal auditors. I think everybody has collaborated to find a balance and moved on, and they continue to learn and continue to explore. And this is going to be a fun time.
I will add one thing that in my personal case, I find my personal productivity actually went up.
Yes, sir.
By working from home. At the workplace, you keep getting disturbed.
No, and I think technology is definitely easing out, which I think all of us would believe. And I think that brings on to me to my next point, because as we all see, and I think we've been talking about tech, and I think that's the way forward that we all see. But definitely finance is, the unsaid, unseen, woven part of any organization, any new change that comes in and all. And we have Partha, who's actually done the CIO, CFO role, and he knows about, and Mr. Parekh also mentioned about his managing the CTO and the CFO roles. So, the collaboration is something that definitely looks is the most beneficial go forward. Partha, sir, if I'm going to just ask you, how do you see that evolving, and what do you think are the things that is going to help even CAs, in this role, and how does that look forward from the new era change that's coming over? How is that going to help us in the future?
There are two parts to your question. First of all, thank you on that rich discussion which we had to the earlier question. Is very important prelude to what can technology do for us. I mean, it was in a sense answering that question. So if you look at technology, I was a CIO before I became a CFO. Okay, only CIO, no, nothing to do with finance. Okay, I was the group CIO for 3-4 years before I got the additional charge of CFO, but I never gave away my CIO title. Yeah, title or role. Okay, because it was so exciting to be in that area at this juncture.
So, yeah, and I think always sorry to interrupt, but yes, the other part of my question, as you mentioned, is also about the balance, because any of the roles other than a CFO role is where you ask for money, and the CFO role is the role where you check for money, as Mr. Parekh said. So I think that's also which I'd like you to focus upon.
Yeah. Thank you. We'll do. If I don't, please remind me at the end, because we'll go in a different direction and then we'll have to come back. So one of the key things that IT and DT and finance and accounts can do together is enable the organization to focus on three: enable, enhance, and engender. Okay. So I use that term so that we know how the organization will progress and how each of this is important constituents. As technology improves, it cannot be as IT department at the center and finance department at the center providing service. It will have to be tools enabling all every individual or every function in the company to operate. So our enable is to become Intel inside to all the department, all the functions, all the processes. That's the first big chunk that is to do. And what it does, it enables a salesperson to sell better, a service person to service better, and so on, and manufacturing person to manufacture better, and so on. So this thing about from a centric to a distributed intelligence is the first big task that finance is very difficult to let go. It's better for them to say, mere paas aao, mere doston mein kissa sunao. So that's the broader theme that I have now, but now we have to distribute, otherwise it will anyway go. Okay, so this is the enabling function which they can together do. But IT also cannot claim that it will do everything from center, and finance can also. But if you allow intelligence to be transmitted and they make the right decisions, so then we can do that. And this is the enable thing. The enhance is when you can put things together and start to form insights, start to form more in this one. That's the second function that they can do together. They should focus on enhance. Now, what does it mean? Let's say, for example, you create an ERP, that's enabling, that's kind of doing. When you create a data lake, you bring the data together, it is again enable because it enables. But when you put the data together and give some snippets of wisdom, basically once I created a program and then put it in front of the service guy who's receiving service vehicles from outside. And I put it intelligence to start talking to him. So, and then one of the questions that the computer prompted him to ask is, ask the customer whether he's planning to replace his car in the next 2 months. And the service guy just looked at the computer, asked him, and the customer said, how do you know? How do you know? I was actually thinking, this is my last service, I know. I wanted to get rid of this car. I was even going to ask you which car to buy. But how did you know? Okay, that's the enhanced part. Yeah, this is how that, and then we can provide this intelligence. And this cannot come only from IT, because IT will have the technology, process they will have, content will have to come from
business.
Yeah, and who is the custodian of data of business? Finance and accounts. So it needs to come from there. So this is the enhance. Engender is basically means creating new business model. So आज के तारीख पे the role of every accounts and finance is going from Parth to Parthasarthi. We cannot be warriors. That role is past. We have to be counselors and enablers to, we have to give away that title. Like their Krishna gave up the kingdom to become a charioteer. We have to give up our accounting kingdom to become charioteer for the organization. And that role, when we go in along with IT, we can engender new business model. What is new business model? Platformization, giving new ways of doing business. Whatever, yesterday's business is no more relevant. And we could, like Nitin said, look at service industry, and manufacturing industry could learn. As service industry learned from manufacturing industry in version 3.0, last era. Okay. Manufacturing, we went ahead. Service is now ahead. Now everyone can follow that what has happened in the technology and service industry. So this is the thing. So this is all that they can do. Very long, simple answer to a short question. But that's what they can do together. Okay. You asked another question which I'm forgetting.
No, it's just that the balancing between the, the ask and the actually, because this.
Yeah, the balance is fire bullets before you fire cannonballs. If you get the IT guy, you will say, "Sab mein paisa lagao, $1 billion dal do." तो हमें भाई इच्छा रहने दे प्लीज फायर बुलेट्स थोड़ा सीख के मतलब ये एक्सपेरिमेंट कर because which technology will work for me I don't know and there are 4 competing technology वो सब लोग एक बार आके कह देंगे एक बार मतलब the IT guys have very nice of talking magic quadrant में what is it that this is what Gartner says is the best thing to do okay best quadrant so वो उसका तो magic है मेरे लिए तो जिग है so how do you make this magic and jig competition? So you'll have to tell them fire bullets before firing cannonball. Okay, nail it and scale it. So that's another thing a finance guy will tell him. First go and nail it now in one place, make it, and then you can scale it. So it is not that don't spend. The biggest risk is not taking risks, but spend it judiciously. Nail it before you scale it. Fire bullets before cannonball. This is what the balance is all about. Yeah, enabling, becoming the banks of the river rather than a dam on the river. Okay.
Partha Sarthi is very lucky because his name, he can either take a role of Parth or he can take a role of Sarthi, and he can keep interchanging anytime required.
Perfect.
I keep changing it. Nitin is quoting because he knows me. I'm just the opposite as well.
No. And Mr. Parekh, I think I was going to mention the same thing. That's the reason I think he didn't leave the CIO thing with becoming the CFO because Partha to chahiye na Sarthi ke saath bhi, to isliye it's like that.
किसी को तो चलाना है ना गोली.
That's what I said. So Sarthi बनने के लिए भी Partha तो चाहिए ना. इसलिए I think very, very rapt, and that's why you're. Nitin, would you like to kind of add something here because you've actually done both also? You're currently doing both. Anything that your views?
Yeah. So Ruchi, number of activities as Partha Sarthi very clearly mentioned. We need a lot of pilots. Very, very aptly said. Nail it before you scale it. I think that works because we keep getting, from various, functions in the company, manufacturing wants certain digital initiatives, quality wants certain digital initiatives, HR wants. So there are a number of, such, stakeholders who want some digital interventions. And then we need to say, okay, let's conduct a pilot. Let's invite some IT company, service company, and do a pilot in one of the plants before, we have more than 25 different plants, let's say in India. So he said, let's pick a one, plant and do a pilot there. How, for example, plant maintenance predictability works, how, wastage accuracy works, how, machine hours or machine stoppages. And then, if it makes sense, then, let's decide, okay, how much, we are going to save because of that. Those will be some assumptions, etc. in that. In a pilot, we decide that, okay, this works, then, okay, now let's roll out to different plants. And that's the way we do for different initiatives. We are taking number of initiatives in terms of digital, in terms of marketing in India, because we have so now portals, where the doctors can come on the portal and have a consultation with the patients through portal only. There is a doctor connect, there is a patient connect. So a lot of initiatives we have been doing in that respect also, because that's the core, in terms of our business in India. But at different functions in different geographies also, we've been taking some steps related to that, even in emerging markets like country like South Africa, country like Philippines. We have been taking steps where most of our medical representatives now are working only on the tablets when there is nothing like pre-printed materials and medicine related things, etc. And through this portal now, a lot of content is given for the doctors also in terms of medicine, what goes into that, what molecule is for what indication, etc. So a lot of information now available rather than our people actually speaking to prescribers.
Yeah. And what you mentioned, Mr. Parekh, and I'm sure all the other panelists will also agree that every industry actually has seen quite a lot of change in terms of really getting technology within, and as CFOs, all of you have actually kind of done the bullets first before the cannons, if I have to use Partha sir's example. But, just sticking back to the topic that we are on in terms of really understanding that what can meta era hold for from a jobs perspective or overall change perspective. So, Mr. Basu, you talked about scenario planning, you talked about changes in the way that we do things and various other stuff. But a very big component that, comes out of the conversation that we're doing is definitely what we learned needs to be unlearned, and definitely new things need to be picked up, right? So what are the things that you feel as finance guys, something that we need to definitely learn to be able to be ready for the era that's coming up? Yes, people have started to pick up things around AI, machine learning. That's the digital part of it, right? But definitely meta is beyond digital, right? It's a higher version. So what's your thoughts in terms of this era is going to help, and what do you think that we need to build or learn which is going to help us in the go forward scenario? What are the things that your insights can bring to us?
That's a very good question. The first thing that comes to my mind in this era of rapid change, in this decade of resets, as I call it, is that the meaning and nature of risk is going to undergo a sea change. And that impacts the CFO, who is considered to be the guardian of risk. If something goes wrong in an organization, right, the CFO not only, Partha said it's good fun, whatever, showering bullets, but we have to take bullets on our chest. Yeah. Cyber security will undergo a sea change. And I don't know what kind of a change. So I keep repeating, my favorite word in today's world is pivot. We need to be ready to make pivot. We need to be ready to, I'll stick my neck out and say, to make mistakes. You have to do things differently, and we are not gods. If you do 5 things, maybe 2 of them will turn out to be good things, good decisions. 3 of them will not turn out to be not so good decisions. But the important thing is to be able to spot these mistakes early on and take corrective action and pivot. That is definitely one thing that's going to happen. The second thing is that the entire finance function, why just the finance function, even the whole organization, will need to be more forward thinking. Focus of this finance function will need to shift from operational finance to spending more time, more energy, more effort in providing financial insights into the future. In Partha's business, M&M, today they have showrooms, in all posh parts of the city. There's one near my house. But tomorrow, that showroom might be a virtual showroom, a 3D showroom, where you can have customers not only coming in, but doing, virtual test drives. In the pharmaceutical, in Nitin's world, right, his medical representatives and the doctors are on tablets. Tomorrow, you will likely have a surgeon inside assisting in a surgery and giving his insights, looking at the patient in virtual reality. Transactions will happen in a completely different paradigm here. And the addressable market, the nature of the markets will change. All these things are reality. And finance needs to not only be an enabler, it needs to also be a guardian of the risk. It needs to be in the forefront of what I call this pivot. And with it, we have to embrace more and more of automation. We have to embrace things like touchless operations. And as Partha rightly pointed out, we have to move towards what I call a self-service model. Information is not the domain of finance any longer or anybody else. Information must be available on tap by who needs it. We also need to move to an era of real-time finance. Real-time, I wouldn't say finance, real-time information. We are not there yet, not just in India, but in other parts of the world as yet. But that will be the crying need of the hour. Not just real-time information about ourselves, but also that of our competitors, also that of the market. We need to recognize that these distinctions between industries and businesses are going to blur. They're already blurred today. They will blur even more. For example, what is Amazon? Let me ask a provocative question. Is it a retail company? Is it a technology company? Is it a media company? It's all of these, right? It's all of these, and it's also none of these. So similarly, our business models are going to change. They're going to evolve. And let me say, we've got to get used to a different kind of workforce over time. 10 years from now, the nature of the workforce in the finance function, other functions too, but we are focusing on finance here. That is going to change. My own belief, Ruchi, is that we will see job creation in a meaningful way, not from the larger established organizations and the so-called, shall I say, in quotes, this more traditional kind of industries, but from the startup community. That's where jobs, the maximum number of jobs are being created today. India has got something like 25,000 startups last year. I think about 100 unicorns. About 5 or 6 years ago, there were 0 unicorns. And that tomorrow, or 5 years from now, there are going to be many more unicorns and many more startups. And they will be the engine of creating more and more jobs in this country. Not, I would say the established companies. Established companies will probably try to reduce the workforce by using the benefit of, automation and tools that we have. And the other trend that is emerging is we have no longer the luxury of having a team which, will continue with us for a long time. Turnovers, job turnovers will change. Opportunities will increase, aspirations will change. We will have to learn to manage with that. That's another change that I see going forward. Exciting times ahead. And I'm particularly, I envy my younger colleagues, who are joining the profession now today. I think they're going to have a much more exciting career than I have had, at least over the last so many years.
No, I think, Mr. Basu, definitely, I think attrition is going to be a large concern, and definitely that's something. And it's not about, from an organization, it may be a concern, but I think it's plethora of opportunities from a candidate perspective, and kind of enhancing them to kind of widen their scope and not limiting them to ages of our elders, where they would just join an organization and retire after 40 years of working together. But it's more about gaining knowledge, moving ahead, picking up more, and unlearning, learning. That whole cycle keeps continuing and moving ahead.
So therefore, you see, Ruchi, we will have to automate as much as we can and keep on automating more and more, such that we can manage these attrition levels, with ease. The organization work must go on and must go on seamlessly.
No, and Partha, you want to kind of say something? Sorry.
Yes, I wanted to say something. I wanted to get your attention before saying something. Okay. Okay.
Sir, up to Partha, I think you're the Sarthi for the session too, so we're not going to miss you at any point in time. You're the most
Okay. All right. So one of the things that Basu talked about, it's important that we are treating jobs old way, while the technology and the companies are moving the new way. And therefore, we're going to find more and more this micro jobs. That means a person doing more than one job. And my entrepreneurship of jobs is what the change which is happening. So as we try to force fit the old job routine in the new one, and which is why nobody wants to come back to work. Many of them, the attrition has gone up since we asked people to come back in many industries. And they all come and say, what's happening? I said, what's happening is you have taught them something more productive, more easier for them. And now you want to change it. Yeah. You say, I want to physically value you to come because I, as an old timer, want to go back to office and sit and work because that gives me more comfort. But this change is happening. So please remember that attrition is also happening because we are fitting round pegs to square holes. So or vice versa. Okay.
No,
So,
and I think you've brought a very important point, but I think I'm going to just pick that after a question, because that's something which was a continuation of the question that I asked Mr. Basu. So I just want to complete on that and then move on to this point that you mentioned, Bata. And that's going to take me back to Sarju. Sarju, we are moving on to the uh, VR, virtual reality world, the augmented reality world with the new era coming up. But definitely, as finance, there are things that definitely we can also pick up and upskill ourselves. So, what's your view that as finance, we need to be upskilling ourselves, which will help us in this new era? Specific aspects that you think will be there.
Right, and I just want to, continue the rhythm. Experiment. I will use the word instead of the bullets to say that yes, you got to have budget for experimenting. I could even stretch it to say budget for failures, which is experimenting per se also. And I think we'll have to do that. Two things more I want to give, and before I answer your question, is that the new era, Ruchi, is something that people have been slightly mundane, but now with this meta and all of this, I think you are able to think when you realize that we need to identify needs of the public. Your business models will have to go to what is the your customer needs, and then you structure solution around. And therefore, job that we are talking about, CAs, when they choose a profile or a profession like CA, have they thought through? Do they know the skill set? Even if have they done the CA, do they know the skill set that where they are, basically their assessment, their temperament, whether it's good for them being an accountant, or it's good for them being in operation function, or good to be in even technology, or even in investment banking. I think somewhere the skill set mapping, what we call shadi.com, I think there'll be now job.com matching, which will be more realistic. It'll be more long term. I've seen attrition. You use the word that there are geographies like Japan where a guy joins and retires 40, 50 years. We have a experience in India where it's 5 years, 7 years, but it's not a stick to go because the company itself is not upskilling in that sense. It's mundane, and the guy who is joining also has not thought through long term. So I think one of the important element is to assess your capabilities, both as you offer value to the organization and organization's assessment of the candidate that gets in. I think that is something which will, emerge, and there will be tools around for both of them to upskill your talent. You are an orator, then there could be a particular profile for you. If you are a more of a mathematical and an IT expert, then there could be a profile for you. All finance related, I'm talking. But the role of finance is not only account keeping. I mean, that's on the byproduct now. Let me use that word. Of course, it's critical, and you have to play that role within the framework as and the deliverable they have to keep. But I think it's more on adding value and creating value. I see some of the things which are going to be emerging, which is, you have to forecast what next opportunities do that, and therefore the upskilling. It could be in-house, it could be external, like, professionals. In one that I think is very prominent is forensic audit. I think that subject matter, because it's going to be all technology, it's going to be virtual. How you evidence things, how you record, how you warehouse, all of that, and impeccability of that. So I think an element of that, IT infra, which is cyber security, the data surveillance. You have a camera while you drive, you cross the signal, you will get an e-challan from RTO. So you have to be aware of those upkeeping. And very important element is, we have seen so far HR doing the training to say that, okay, this is the culture, okay, this is the motivational sessions, but I think it's going to be IT sessions more prominent, because they will have to keep everybody to the skill set to respond to that, fast change that is happening. And therefore, it's going to be a carve out of a team, which is a combination and collaboration of finance, IT, and governance, to say that, look, how the speed of technology and the usefulness of it, or otherwise, or being risk, in the sense risk is a very, very pertinent point, Joy, you mentioned about, because confidentiality, after all, business also has their own model confidentiality. How much to, obviously boundary line that is going to be important. Critical part of the whole thing is real-time feedback. Guys, we are forgetting now, your feedback is instant. The span of attention is less than 10 seconds on an advertisement. So your pitch has to be, in terms of sales, has to be so sharp that he guys move to the next page. Otherwise, you don't get next page viewer. And let's say grievance. Now, if you are in a meta era, your grievance has to be quickly turned around. And if that experience is not there, somebody will jump the gun and go to the next bus. So I think grievance management, the real-time feedback, the IT infra and data surveillance, the forensic, the AI, the analytics mindset, on the fly. I think Partha mentioned that. It's going to be very, very important to get things on the fly. You will have account on top of it. You have a layer which will give slice and dice into matrices and ratios, and then you'll have to pick up those directions where the customer is going to whether buy the next product, or he's going to pay the next premium, or he's going to probably call us again. Now all of that is in subject matter gaining. I think traditional mindset will have to obviously keep those culture aside, but and intact. But this switch of mindset shift of getting into bandwagon of forensic, IT, infra, data analytics, AI training is going to be very, very critical. And it's going to be more or less now that people will be looking at a package solution. So there is a decentralization which is happening where you plug and play and do actually more, if somebody who can give a solution to this as a package, which will, I think, flourish. There could be also specialists where you can decentralize and head on as a thread and still achieve that. But these are the opportunities which are coming. So upskilling could be in this side of the era where you are clearly ensuring the need of the customer, the protection of the customer. At the same time, element of profits are always there, because profit is not a bad word. So businesses will have to align to give more value back to the customer, and that upskilling in terms of this risk and all of that I said is going to be playing a prominent role.
No. I think that's going to take me on to a specific question, and I'm coming back to what Partha mentioned before.
Ruchi, can I add something here?
Yeah, Parth, sir, just give me a minute. Actually,
Sure,
I'll
sure.
come back to you on that. But I'm just connecting because I just got a question also from the group. I do have a couple of questions coming up, but I thought this was something relevant here at this moment. So I thought, let me just connect back and then move on to our conversation. So Partha sir, there's a very interesting question that I got, and I couldn't stop myself to ask that in between our conversation. And that's actually about, a CA asking that this person is currently working in ERP implementation as consultant. He's an ERP implementation consultant, and he says that it's his future role to become a CFO. So what should be the go forward way? Should he change his job profile to financial planning? And it actually brought me back to what we've been discussing so far. And I'm just putting this question to Partha just randomly because I thought he'll have a very witty answer to the question. So that's the reason I'm just putting it back to him. Is coming back to this, what's your thought? Do we really need to change our strategies just because of that, or as we've been hearing from all of you here, that it's just adding on, moving on, taking on? What's your view?
So thank you very much. First and foremost is that whoever has asked that question, you touched the dilemma of the new era in a very succinct way. Okay, and therefore it's not a special question. It can be a generic question that we can make out of it. First is, if I knew the answer, then I'm certainly not going to reveal it here. Then I would use an industry, create an industry out of it. Yeah, okay, because it's such a mool mantra that is being there. But clearly, there are some guidelines that we can think about. Okay, when I was became the group CFO, I was asked the question, what is the legacy creating thing that you want to do? Okay, it took me months, and then I came back and answered my CMD, okay, Chairman and Managing Director. I answered that I want to open a finance academy. And he said, of all the things that I thought you will tell, I never thought this will be the answer. And I asked him why. And he asked me why. He says, because the future is not going to be anything of the past. People will have to change, adapt, to use Joyce's term pivot. How do we enable them to pivot? I said, I want more researchers and doctorates from my team. Then pure, just what they came out with accounting knowledge. I want them to adapt to any situation that comes. What the question that was asked indirectly is, FP&A is more like analysis, research thing. So basically, and then we started the finance academy, to be honest. And I think that helped dramatically as to adapt to any situation. Okay. Now the new CFOs will need to adapt to technology, giving a lot of inputs, and them trying to get that additional insight, which even artificial intelligence can't do. And somebody, I don't know whether I can quote Sergio or Joy, but one of them did talk about that that's still going to remain the forte of human beings. Yeah. So if you have to do in the future, CFO will need to So I will say, find ways to appreciate technology and immerse yourself. Have that as Intel Insight. Turn to research and adaptation more, and bring classroom into work and work into classroom. Yeah. And that is what the best you can do. Do FP&A if that is what you think helps you in the process. But it's not an essential, but it's one way to pivot.
Yeah, can I add to that?
Yeah, no, and definitely, Mr. Basu, and I think this is definitely a question that I think post experiences we all learn, and I think that's the dilemma, as we mentioned, for the younger guys and girls, that they always think of that shift. So yeah, Mr. Basu, you can definitely add.
Very quickly,
it's a good topic.
Yeah, to
this
lady or gentleman who raised this question, and the point I'd like to say earlier, and I've like Nitin and I have been, and Partha, all four of us in this panel have been working for a long time. Earlier,
me too.
Only you too. Not as much anyway. Still, your hairs are still black. Mine have grown great. So going back to this, earlier there was a mindset in India Inc. that only somebody who understands company law, direct, indirect tax, right, and it is the right person to become the CFO. That has long changed. The Japanese have shown this for years, for decades. In fact, they take job rotation very seriously. And to become the head or CEO of a company, one of the things that the person must do is he must at some point in time become a CFO. And today, therefore, you have not just abroad, but even in India, people with other skill sets becoming CFOs of the organization. And that trend is going to continue. Just as you have the conductor of an orchestra, right? He does not need to know how to play the saxophone, but he knows how to guide and control the saxophone player. The saxophone player or the trumpet player is an expert in his own field there. So to answer, but this gentleman, if he or she, I'm not sure, has aspirations, right, of moving to become the CFO, then he or she needs to be working for a progressive organization that encourages these aspirations. And many of our organizations tend to keep their people in silos. So a tax expert remains a tax expert. An ERP expert remains an ERP expert. So in that environment, it's like the soil on which you grow the plant. Make sure that you are in the right kind of soil. Otherwise, I stick my neck out and, advise this person to find such a soil.
Mr. Parekh, I think I'm going to put both these questions to you. One is on the upskilling that we were already talking, for the meta era. And also, is really that shifting required, or it's just, the add-on that this person needs to kind of do to kind of get a CFO role?
So I think research shows that, millennials will constitute about 75% of workforce just by 2025 in most developed countries. And I don't think India is not going to be exception. So the speed at which this change is happening, I think is enormous, unexpected. I remember before, I think 3-4 years, Parsarthi and I having a discussion, and he telling me about reverse mentoring. And he says there are these new young people with technology background from IITs, IIMs of the world. They're telling us how the technology can help us. So we have wisdom, we have the experience, and they have the technology. How do we make a better combination out of that? I think that's important. But at the same time, the way the technology is making changes, the way even forget about the structured data, even the unstructured data in terms of photographs, videos, text, and to make a meaningful business insights out of that requires a good understanding of technology, data science, and good understanding of business. That is what will make CFOs very powerful, as a business partner. I'm not trying to say that, as Basu mentioned about traditional, knowledge of Companies Act or accounting standards and taxation, etc. They're not going to be not important, but the technology part, the business insight part is, I think, going to be much more important. And today's generation, is what they, unlike our generation where predictability was a bonus or a premium. Now experimentation, innovation, faster changes, I think that is what is required. And for a generation like us, with experience, I think we need to quickly adapt to that. And I would here like to just quote Nida Fazli here, saying that किसी के वास्ते राहें कहाँ बदलती है, तुम अपने आप को खुद ही बदल सको तो चलो. So ये सफर में ये प्रॉब्लम रहने वाला है कि सफर में धूप तो होगी, जो चल सको तो चलो. So all of us will have to now go to that path where we say, okay, you and me, no, it's not like you and me, we together will assert a new world here.
No,
and just on the second part of the question, whether he should make change, what I have learned over a period of time that multidisciplinary knowledge certainly helps. Whether you're only IT or you're finance, I think why not both? That helps. So somewhere rather than saying whether I should become only this or only that, I think transition and rotation, that you've done something of IT or something of finance would certainly make you much more powerful as a finance person ultimately. And since this program is from members in industry committee, I would also strongly recommend Ruchi you to propose to institute that in our curriculum for chartered accountancy, I think a significant shift would be required to now create CAs who take care of future. Like if I just talk about knowledge, skills, and attitude, which are general ingredients of leadership, I think knowledge is what is given a lot of importance in CA course. Your knowledge of just accounting standards, your knowledge of joint venture and consignment accounts and whatnot, and taxation, etc. Whereas the skill part, where is the attitude part, which you make a good leaders. I think a lot of weightage there. And maybe recently I was in one FICCI CFO council meeting, and so discussion took place about these professionals. There was a discussion that why don't we make 1 year of practical training a compulsory part, rather than that being even industrial training of 1 year is even today feasible. But if the institute makes this a compulsory, that 1 year of industrial training is compulsory, is a part of the overall 3 years of articleship or what, I think that would enable a practical experience also. And how do we bring this practical touch in terms of technology in curriculum through some endeavors and innovative ways of handling that? I think that can make better CFOs for future.
And I'm just going to continue and get Sarju's thoughts also on this, sir.
Yeah,
You've also been a CFO. Is there something that you did differently to become a CFO, or how did that happen?
I think very important to invest in yourself and know who you are. I think the friend of mine who has raised this question has already taken a step ahead. There is nothing silly in life. I think there are a lot of people who may not have asked. He has asked it, right? Now, if he has asked it, he has an aspiration. He has to move on that aspiration. The very fact that he's asking is kudos to him. And therefore, the starting point is knowing who you are and then investing in getting that target. I don't think so there is any one fits for all or anything. It's a multitasking. It's a variety of attitudes, aptitudes, skills that go along, and it's circumstances that take you to that position. But clearly, if you have to, go into a CFO position, then you have to leave the word CFO and embedded those important elements. For instance, I call the C, the custodianship or guardianship that we use the word quite often in this conversation, or the collaboration. The F is the finance, which is obviously we look at return on investment or return on equity or the leverage ratio or being frugal. Now these are the elements. The O is an overall growth that we look about, and that's where we say need-based, customer centricity, grievance management. So you have to play your role, and common sense is really will take you there. It is not to be silly to keep quiet and sitting in a room. It is raising your hand. So I would strongly urge my colleagues out here who particularly mentioned that raise your hand that you can also do that. If there is an opportunity to, say FP&A, you want to do something else together, you say, no, direct tax is not my forte. Step in there. You will have colleagues who will bail you out. So step in there and then see that you are playing variety of field. People will spot the brightness in you, and I think you will catch up. So it's all about raising hands and getting spotted.
No.
That's a real practical way of I feel.
Agreed. And great insights, definitely, because I'm sure the kind of knowledge and experience you guys have, it's definitely the right direction and right things that you've suggested. Now it's upon people on how they pick up. And I'm sorry I got interrupted with this question, because that was a question I couldn't stop myself. I have a lot of more questions coming in from audiences, but I just thought I'll push this in first before we and coming back to our own conversation, and the most important aspect in this meta era is about virtualization that we've all talking about, that we know we're going to move on to. And definitely the finance function is also going to look for a change. And when I talk about finance function, the epitome of this function is about the CFO, right? And with new age organizations coming up, the startups, unicorns, and as we all know, and I'm sure we all read, that India is the biggest market where you have startups, and also these startups converting into unicorns in among the worlds. So do you think and we're talking about gig economy, we're talking about virtualization of a CFO role. So if I can ask Mr. Parekh as an example, what do you think? Will a virtual CFO role or having multiple organizations in the go forward world be a more looked forward kind of a thing, or do you think that was where we are going to, not one organization but multiple organizations management together?
Yeah, I think this virtual CFO, I think, is certainly a boon for many companies, especially SMEs and startups who either do not need or cannot afford full-time services of various professionals. And there have been number of such services, starting with basic accounting, back office operations, accounting records, accounts finalization, being a good support with auditor in terms of answering the audit queries, finalization, also in terms of budgeting exercise or costing part or taxation part, getting some kind of finance analysis, cash flow statement, business insights. From that to various other compliance function also, like let's say corporate governance in terms of board, constitution, minutes, onwards compliance with listing requirements or compliance of Companies Act, Income Tax Act, accounting standards, etc. From that function to even a growth function, providing capital in terms of project finance work, helping them in terms of growth plan, their future, how robust is the plan, become a devil's advocate in terms of their plan, etc. Risk management, helping them with the MIS, ERP, secretary, legal, I think HR, so many things. I think as a virtual CFO one can provide, which otherwise companies may have to either go for a full-time employees or to many other different consultants. So I think yes, there's a great service, and I certainly believe that it has got a good future. While I also know that there have been some of them already operating in India, but I believe that considering the pace at which SMEs are growing and the pace at which the startups are growing in India, I think there is a great future ahead of you.
Partha sir, would you like to kind of add on to this whole concept of virtual CFOs?
Sorry, मैं तो जग बीती नहीं बताऊंगा, आप बीती बताऊंगा. So I'm going to talk about personal self. A year and a half back, I stepped down from my normal job because I wanted to do social service. I think it's time to give back for the world, and therefore I quit. Right. So I was no more group CFO for Mahindra starting April, 2021. Okay. So 1st April 2021. So what happened is, while I was doing the social work, how am I approached by various companies? Okay, there are startups who are coming and say, come and help me, sit with me and guide me. Some people give a lot of good adjectives and it looks more. In fact, when I was doing, I went to Nitin and said, Nitin, bahut dar lag raha hai. I don't know what I'm going to do. If anybody is going to want me to do anything, and after all, I have to earn something also, even as I'm doing social service. Okay, but now I'm finding it, so many people are coming and saying, hey, can you come for 1 hour, 2 hours and just help us, guide us? This is startups. Okay. So there are about 4 or 5 startups that I'm helping. Then there are people who are coming and saying, you know what, I'm going to get an internal CFO, but help me with guiding the CFO to become better. We need the experience along with this. And then it said, but I'm sitting in Mumbai, and many of these companies are in Chennai, in Bangalore, in Delhi, in Calcutta. And then we said, how do we do it? So virtually and through this. So I have this kind of train the trainer or mentor the CFO, train the CFO kind of thing, train the trainer kind of concept. Then I have boards on which they are saying, come, and through the board, I'm not just giving you, but giving a board role with a job to do this one, again virtual. So this is how the job market is changed for me, in the new era. And I think this is just a start. That's why I said, when people are quitting or attrition, because you're trying to find full-time jobs when meaningful things could be much, much bigger and much better. So sorry. So I just wanted to give you that input.
No, and I think, sir, that's a great input, because I'm sure a lot of people, are looking for such options, and I'm sure you've opened the doors for many to tap on and come back to you, because they know that now they will not have to pay as they may wanting to be paid. So,
paper use ho gaya
At your service.
At your service.
So just being cognizant of fact, and I have lots of questions that have come up. I don't think I'll be able to cover them all, but at least I'm going to pick up the essence of the questions and cover with our panelists today. So Joy, sir, I have a question which I think I can direct to you. Is that here I've got a question which a person asks, that do you think that will in future the finance role be more business leadership support, finance backing, and tax with less of accounting? Do you think that's what will the future be? So you're on mute.
Well, that's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. But in fact, I have a slight disagreement with this question. I will say, Ruchi, that over the last, at least 30, 40, 50 years, the finance and the CFO's function has always been that of business support. There's been no time when the finance function is not expected to support the business. And in fact, within the finance function of all our companies, we also have specific FP&A roles. The FP&A roles really are an extension of the business. So that is true. What has changed is that the nature of business itself is undergoing a sea change. Earlier, the pace of change used to be much slower. When you have a strategy, when you have a plan, you generally work towards it. You are sailing, as shall I say, on calm waters, relatively calm waters. Today, you are sailing in a choppy environment, in a choppy sea. There are waves. These waves could turn out to be tsunamis. And if you are agile, they could be waves of great opportunity. On the other hand, If you're not agile, you could be shipwrecked. So therefore, to that extent, the role that you have as a business support, yes, has certainly improved. And things like accounting, there is so much change in technology, and continually there will be more change in technology. We will have to push as much of the stuff that can be automated, you know, to be automated, and take the man out of that, the human element out of that, so we can focus on these bigger things, the strategy, the future, the planning, the pivoting, forecasting. This is where the finance function and CFO is expected to play a greater portion of his time.
No, I think you've correctly captured, because I think we should not limit ourselves, as you mentioned, and a lot. And I think that came up out of the discussion earlier also, that it's not about picking any specific aspect only is what really makes you kind of go forward. It is the composite. If I have to say, it's the whole package that matters rather than only an individual skill set. And we talked about it, saying that it's knowledge, it's attribute, it's your attitude, it's your way that you work, a lot of things that comprise. And definitely the knowledge base, or that foundation has to remain, but it has to be topped up with, like as we said, the cherry on the cake has to be your attitude, your execution skills, your people handling skills. All of that will together have to do it.
Yeah, earlier what happened, Ruchi, was we used to spend a disproportionate time on accounting, closing the books, reconciling figures, branch and head office accounts not tallying, right, internal credit notes, external, etc., reconciliations. A lot of time that has come down further, and that should come down even more, because as businesses, grow on a scale, continuously manually doing these things is not this thing feasible. And the good thing is that hopefully should free us up, and that's been happening, so that we are able to contribute more meaningful to strategy. And strategy is something that is evolving, yeah. And I keep saying strategy is really scenario building, making mistakes, pivoting, yeah. And we
Okay.
have to be part and parcel of that, right now, today, more so than ever. In the future, maybe even more so.
Okay. Saju, I have a question that's come up based on and I'm just kind of, just for the audience to know, I may not be picking your specific questions. I may be clubbing a couple of themes and putting the questions to our panelists. So the answers to your questions are there, but it's not in the same black and white format. So please, and that helps me to cover more questions. So Saju, yeah, the question that came up was around the governance. With the metaverse, we talked about the risks that it may bring in. So what are some of the governance things, or things that you feel people need to be kind of thinking about as their individual roles within the finance function?
Right. I think, let me correlate with the virtual CFO and the ask which was there a while ago. You see, you ought to outsource what is, so to say, execution driven, what is automation driven, and it's perfectly fine if you outsource there. But when it comes to decision making, there are matters of gray, right? And CFO and CEO, day in and day out, have to deal growth with deciphering matters in gray, and they are decision making items, and therefore those cannot be outsourced. And when it comes to governance, it is very, very important. And this is one area where you obviously tend to take an edge if your decisions in gray are going to be right. And when you are taking decisions in gray, right, you have to take interest of all the stakeholders. It can't be only profiteering, it can't be only revenue, it has to be all the stakeholders, including the regulators around. And then you say, okay, this is doable, but for 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's very easy to say no to avoid any risk. You can't be risk averse, you've got to take risk. The question is in governance is, am I protecting all the stakeholders? Is my judgment going to be beneficial? Later on, market environment can change and I'm here to remodel, rejig, renew, refresh. But while I take a decision, certainly I will have a list of my constituents, my stakeholders, and saying that I'm tick boxing everything. And I mean, my faculty colleagues will understand. You even do tax planning. Now, tax planning is absolutely fine, but then there is an element of guard. So beyond the point, I'm trying to say you have to be mindful and put those questions that is this going to be in the perfect ticking boxing of the fact that what I'm going to do is going to be long term and it's going to only grow. So your governance question is more of playing in the gray and taking a decision for all the stakeholders. Otherwise, numbers and your execution and your filing returns month on quarter, all of that can, of course, be outsourced. And that's what I think that when virtual CFO as a service provider, as a somebody who wants to actually offer that they are virtual CFOs, can they find a seat on the table vis-a-vis the CEO? Because there will be matters which are so unique, not to use confidential, but they are so unique that they need to be on execution on closed doors. And therefore, sometimes this becomes a grapple in the mind is how much can a virtual CFO offer to a business enabler? And very critically, Joy, you rightly said that CFO now are business enablers. Business enabler is nothing but aiding the CEO with the right direction, with the right litmus test and the right output, but ensuring that it's good for all.
Sudhir, I think a very, you've mentioned a word which I think is my next question, which is about, and I'm going to direct this to Mr. Partha. There's a question that we've got that, how can really a CFO become a CEO in this meta era? Do we think, because I'm sure everybody is aspiring to go forward. So how to use meta era to kind of go from a CFO to really the CEO of an organization? And is that really doable? So you're on mute before you start speaking.
100% doable. And if we didn't, with all the benefits that we have, I'll always say start with your career aspiration of CFO plus. Don't start with only CFO, because if technology has evened out things for others vis-a-vis finance, because they don't only have to rely on the CFO. Now, many things can come out from data and analysis itself. Similarly, all other functions have got much more technology this. So your technology handicaps has become enablers now. Technology has become enablers instead of you having a handicap. So if you didn't try in this era, and what is the best common denominator in the world? Money and financials. So go for it.
I think CFO is the natural transition to the CEO wherever practical.
At the same time, I think the opportunities are now much brighter because of this, from the traditional, CFOs like accounting and tax and other things or compliance. Now, becoming a solid business partner and with a lot of business understanding, CFOs now are much more eligible to become CEO, I think, in the new era.
Yeah. Mr. Basu, your thoughts?
I have a slightly different thought. Yes, anybody can become the CFO, and the person most capable can become the CFO. Sometimes due to politics, not the best person becomes the CFO, somebody else does. But look, my own view is that the CFO, and here I'm probably being a little provocative, is not someone particularly special. He is special, yes, but so too are others. So I look at the various functions, whether it's marketing, whether it's finance, whether it's sales, HR, communications, production. They are all important and critical parts of an organization. I mean, to quote an example from Partha's auto industry, I view them as all integral and important parts of an engine. In an engine, you've got the carburetor, the distributor, the alternator, the generator. Each of them plays an important part. The CFO does play a very, very important part. And he's got one more distinct role, is that he's the guardian of information, the guardian of risks. To that extent, his responsibilities are greater. So it does not necessarily mean that the CFO is the logical here. Slightly, I'm going to differ with one of my colleagues. He is the person who step into the shoes. If he is good enough, right? And if he is, shall I say, even if not good enough, politically savvy enough, if I may use a slightly unparliamentary expression, then he will get to the top. It is not necessarily, yes, there are enough cases of CFOs becoming CEOs, but there are enough cases of people from other functions also stepping into the show.
Absolutely, Basu, you're absolutely right. The only change that I said is that in the new era with the better or larger business related, business insight related role, the chances of CFOs becoming CEOs are much better compared to what they were.
Oh yes, earlier that I concede. Earlier, generally people stayed in a silo.
Yeah, that is right.
I remained in the finance function. That is changing. That definitely is happening.
Our visioning is also an important facet in that, right? So if you aspire, then only you become. We aspire to become only CFOs, then we can.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
So that also is changed, right? Now,
Yes.
Hausle buland hai, the CEO hath mein. So
Yes, Partha, and you are a living example. I think people like me, we will remain CFOs. Yeah. But you have moved on to bigger things. Yeah. And that's a feather in your cap.
okay, tum chodoge nahi mere ko.
I love the chemistry there. It's really nice, and it shows.
I know Partha for a number of years. Yeah.
And we can definitely see that on the panel, So I think we can keep going. And as I said at the start, more than 100 years of an experience on this platform, and having only 2 hours is very, very less, definitely. And I think we didn't even know how the time went off, and both the panel and the topic was really competent enough to kind of keep going, and we can still keep going, but I think I have to be cognizant of the audience so that they don't beat me up as a moderator. So I am really thankful to each of my panelists to be here today and sharing their insights. It's really been a very engaging and a learning experience. Even I've picked up a lot of key points out here, which is going to help me guide myself in my own journey. I am definitely going to reach out on a personal note to Mr. Partha, because I think I've also started a bit of my journey, maybe early in life, to kind of give back to the society. So if I can kind of plug in with him somewhere, and I'm sure if he can kind of help me out, then I think we are going to start the journey. Anybody who wants to join the bandwagon is definitely, I'm sure, on behalf of Mr. Partha Sarathy, I'm saying we're happy to kind of help and support, because it's time that we not only give back to the institute that we come from, but also to the society. That's an important aspect. And thanks to all the audience to kind of have your questions. We may have not covered a couple of questions, but we have to be cognizant of time, and we have to actually bring in the right points that we were here for. So thanks once again, Mr. Parekh, Mr. Sarju, Mr. Parthasarathy, and Mr. Basu for your deliberations, your insights. And it's enormously nice to have this kind of what I can say, I'm really lost of words, because it was such a knowledgeable kind of a session, and a light-hearted session, lots of things to learn. And I'm sure as the institute will have such more deliberations for our own people. And I sometimes do think that this was not there at our times while we were doing our CS, but yes, something new coming up for the newer generation is always nice. So thanks once again. Great topic. And back over to Mr. Ranganathan. On behalf of all the panelists, thank you to the institute and the committee for organizing this.
And thanks to Ruchi.
Ruchi, to you also for a wonderful
panelists.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good to be part of the Allied
Thank
group.
you so much. Sir, in fact, no, the ICA learns a lot from its members, and I was hearing to this very knowledgeable session. There is one remark made by CA Nitin Parikh ji about industrial training being made compulsory. Sir, Institute has already heard this. There were other couple of eminent members also made this session. And what Institute's council has decided, sir, we have made it compulsory, sir. And we have sent an amendment proposal to the government by reducing the articleship training from 3 years to 2 years and making 1 year of industrial training compulsory. It's particularly because 90% of our newly qualified, they are going towards industry. Only 10% is going towards practice. What we have done is we have proposed that those who want to go to practice, they can obtain certificate of practice by working in a CA office for 1 year. So that we have done. This is already in principle approved by central government also, that the amendment proposals are before the public for public exposure. In the next 2-3 months, this will become a law. Thank you so very much, sir. And these are the inputs which come from our own members as to where the nation is going, where the economy is going, and what our curriculum should do. So we have made it. In fact, we have reduced the number of papers now, and we also introduced 4 papers of self-study, at their own pace, and an open book examination. So many amendments have been made in our curriculum, which we normally used to change once in 10 years. Now we have decided we will sit on the curriculum once in 5 years. So
Very good.
last amendment was in 2017. 2022 will see a lot of major amendments, and members like you are the contributors towards that. Thank you so very much, sir. Very grateful to all of you for your time and for spending Saturday forenoon with us. Grateful. Bye bye, sir.
Thanks.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Richie.
Thank you.